we have heard all kinds of things when talking about climate change and the different trajectories through history that have brought to this crisis. And we also heard that it's the time frame to try to solve this crisis is very limited. I'm the director of an institute that has a very interesting name. It's called the Institute of Future and Innovation Studies. Now, when analyzing the incredibly complex dynamics that brought to the crisis, I think it's important to be able to go back a little bit in history. One of the key functions of my institute, which is an institute within a university framework, is that of providing students with the tools to be able to understand the social conditions and the dimensions that influence the evolution, transformation, and impact of different scenarios in innovation. Now, one of the key problems when analyzing what brought us to this current stage, it's really based on, I would say, what is a lack of experience. So the initial conditions for the transformation of climate really had an origin with the transformation of the industrial complex, the transformation of modernity, the transformation of production, the transformation and processes of invention of electricity and other forms of energy, and the key role of technology in transforming our life. What we have learned in these decades is that to be able to foresee what the impact of an emerging technology is going to be is a fundamental dimension of any technological evolution. I want to talk about social responsibility, technology, and the role of the governance of the future, and how this might have an impact on solving the current crisis of the climate change, and also to foresee the possible future crises as the ones that might, for example, emerge by an unencumbered or unaccountable evolution of artificial intelligence. So one of the key roles of the Institute is to be able to understand these evolutions and to foresee these patterns. Now, when you think about the evolution of the or different kind of levels of evolution in technology, we clearly can see that there's a direct correlation between energy consumption and economic growth. So it's kind of, we have to remember that part of the crisis is grounded in an immensely transformative social process that has been incredibly positive for humanity. The transformation of forms of production, the innovation in technology, the transformation of energy into forms of labor had a direct bearing on the improvement of many societies. There is a direct link between how much we consume in terms of energy and the economic growth of a society and the social conditions, the health, and we can say the well-being of the societies that consume most energy. This is an undeniable truth. I mean, there's an historical dimension to this, but it's more nuanced than that. If you look, for example, at the world as it is today, we are about 7.6 billion people on the planet. It's 2020, and 1.2 billion people on this planet right now still have very little access or no access to electricity. 1.2 billion people have no access to electricity. 5 countries around the world consume 80% of the global consumption of energy. There's a profound difference in the access and consumption of energy and the consequences that this production of energy had for the planet. Those societies that consume the most have a responsibility. They've received advantages from this technological evolution and the use of these energies. It's interesting and it's important to understand that whenever we think about the solution of climate change, we have also to account and we have to be aware of finding solutions that are not part of a first world kind of the green economy cannot be a first world global project. It needs to be able to create sustainable solutions that offer the same opportunities to all the people around the world that still didn't manage to take advantage of all the transformative relations and the social and economic processes that have characterized this reliance on energy. If you look at the cost of energy today, there's still a profound imbalance between the cost of combustible fuels and alternative energy. It's the ratio of some of them, it's 8-1. For example, if you think about nuclear energy, and I think it's 6 or 5-1 if you compare it to other forms of energy. Now it's important to understand that whatever technological solution might be implemented to solve the crisis, it needs to be one that is sustainable, scalable, and one that can be also adopted and implemented by all societies. So there's a very complex dimension. So on one side, I understand the debate about this process of transformation of energy, but on the other side, I also know the curve that characterizes all technologies that started, that are innovative, and they're in the early stage of evolution are normally more costly. And in this specific case, can be only afforded by societies with greatest economic means. But it also means that these kind of technologies and the evolution of these technologies needs to be guided into a process that wants to resolve all problems in an organic way. And I think the only way that it can be done it's by a form of cooperation and collaboration. Now, it's important to understand the role of different agencies in this process of transformation. I like to talk and I like to discuss what I call a multi-stakeholder approach. A multi-stakeholder approach means that different actors within civic society need to collaborate together within their own agendas and accounting for their own agendas, trying to reach an equilibrium where all interests have reached the balance. If you think about civic society and the emphasis that is normally put on the individual, on our ability to have to solve the problem of energy consumption and this reliance of energy and the consequences that they have for climate change. The transformation will be gradual and will be complex. It's clear that cannot be through one form of energy. It's clear that an entire system needs to evolve from one form of energy and the use of one form of energy to another. It's clear also that this transformation has a cost. If you try to look at China, for example, which is certainly one of the countries in the world that now has the biggest footprint in terms of consumption and polluting, it's complicated for a society that is going through such a profound process of economic transformation to immediately transform the entire infrastructure that is based on a specific form of energy towards another. But China itself, although is certainly one of the countries that is contributing the most to the problem right now, is fully aware of the incredible advantage that there is in developing alternative forms of energy production. And probably is one of the countries that is investing the most. I think that the competitive advantage of innovation in the energy sector should be one of the leading forms of conversation. There is a process of transformation, technology is in continuous evolution, and companies around the world and nations and governments have an interest in creating and sustaining this process of transformation. Within this conversation, I think there needs to be also an emphasis on the scalability and the sustainability of these technologies. But when I talk about scalability and sustainability, I perhaps refer to the broader ability of the entire world and society to take advantage of the use of this renewable energy or these alternative energies. So a macro picture should be emerging from this conversation. The role of education is pivotal in this process of transformation. People might tell you that we have to try to target this evolution within a decade. In my view, this transformation will require certainly more than a decade, but the ability to project, organize, and articulate this transformation through 1, 2, or 3 decades is perhaps one of the fundamental functions of the leaders of tomorrow. The universities should be able to try to educate students and future leaders to understand the complex dimensions of this process of transformation. They should be able to account for different elements that are pivotal in this process of transformation, and they also should be able to foresee what are the possible challenges that are going to emerge in the future. So this is what I call the governance of the future. And by this, I mean that only through a multi-stakeholder collaboration with education and the engagement of the present leaders and leaders of the future, we can really foresee an evolution that not only tackles the immediate crisis of the global climate change, but also the future crisis of the scarcity of the resources and the constant increase in energy that will be required so that everybody on the planet has the same and can take the same advantage of the process of innovation that are led by technology and by energy as a driver of these processes.